In 2017, Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick suggested that his company was under-monetizing users, despite Grand Theft Auto 5, thanks to GTA Online, being the most profitable piece of media ever, and I mean ever. Zelnick seemed to think that it wasn't making enough money still, suggesting there was more wood to chop, his words, in terms of getting more money from the end user. Now this is of course typical corporate greed. A company makes ridiculous amounts, makes more money than any video games ever fucking made, but then wants to make more because that's all these companies exist to do, make money, regardless of decency or even in some cases physics, because if they conceivably make as much money as they can, they're still under pressure from shareholders to make even more, whether or not that's fucking possible. That's why the industry's in a fucking slump right now. Anyway, typical corporate greed, but on top of that, it turns out Strauss Zelnick has a personal reason to push microtransactions as hard as he's been pushing. He's actually said before that he prioritizes games with monetization, that every single title they produce will aim to have recurrent user spending. And there's a personal reason for that. It's not just corporate greed, it's personal greed as well, because Strauss Zelnick, a man with a net worth of at least $105 million, a man so rich he never has to worry about money ever again. He could not conceivably spend the money he has, is set to get a big fat bonus based on how successful the company's monetization is. Take-Two is issuing Zelnick Media 315,315 units of restricted stock. That is 315315. Restricted stock is stock that doesn't matter until certain conditions are met, at which point it vests and becomes either real stock or a cash bonus. To put it in the absolute most simple of terms, Strauss Zelnick gets shit when he does shit. There are many performance-based awards that will get this stock to unlock, and one of them is Recurrent Consumer Spending. Now, we've talked about that term before. I'm actually talking about it on the Jimquisition this Monday as well. Recurrent Consumer Spending, or as it's more popularly known, Recurrent User Spending, is the game industry's favourite term for microtransactions and other forms of aggressive monetization, because they know by now the term microtransactions has become a dirty word due to all of the abuse and predation and exploitation that's gone into the implementation of them. So they doll it up with recurrent user spending as if we can't see fucking through it. Of the restricted stock, there's between 13,986 and 27,972 that will vest based on how much customers spend on recurrent user spending, microtransactions, add-ons, all of that shit. Reading the Kotaku article from which this information's derived, if it's an okay to good year for in-game spending, the units will vest at 50% or even 100%, and if in-game spending exceeds expectations, the units vest at 200%. The article also says that if the stock were to vest today at a trading rate of $90.41 per share, Zelnick Media could get up to $2.5 million and quite a bit of change. Now, these bonuses aren't unlocked until 2 years anyway, and the value will of course depend on stock prices at the time, but Zelnick Media gets a massive payday if people are spending more on microtransactions, 60% of which goes to Strauss himself, the man who, as we've already established, is absurdly rich. So it's hardly any wonder that GTA Online and Red Dead Online are grindy, greedy, microtransaction-fueled pieces of shit. And it's little wonder people are worried about Borderlands 3. I mean, that series is proudly boasting about being the original looter-shooter, and a lot of live service games gleefully exploit that looter-shooter formula because it can make them a lot of money. You know, loot-based games can be turned into massive grind fests that tempt people into spending more money. So while one hopes Borderlands 3 won't be an overly monetized piece of garbage, the worry is there, and Strauss Zelnick certainly isn't incentivized incentivized to avoid predatory, exploitative, greedy game design. In fact, he's incentivized to embrace it, to publish as much of that fucking guff as possible. Now, none of this is especially new news, not just for Take-Two, but for the industry overall. Obviously, these companies are going to give massive bonuses to the executives at the top if the company makes more money. But this speaks further to the point I've been making on this channel in recent months, that this is normal. And that's what's fucked up about it, that it isn't surprising, that it is business as usual. It should be considered fucking freakish that a man as rich as Strauss Zelnick does terrible things to make even more money that he doesn't fucking need. And some people may think that's fine, you know, that the mega rich deserve to be mega rich because of some reasons, because they're at the head of a big fucking corporation. That this is fine, that this is business as usual, and companies only exist to make money and are allowed to do whatever they want to get that money. But those people in turn don't get to be upset when games turn out to be horrible grindfests, concerned with producing addictive, not interesting gameplay. Games that have turned more into daily chores than interesting experiences with memorable stories or characters or anything that makes games a potentially engaging art form. And again, I want to put pay to this because people come at me with this fucking reason that they support microtransactions in games because that in turn supports game developers. That supporting microtransactions helps game developers keep their jobs. When it doesn't, publishers initiate mass layoffs regularly as part of their business plan, regardless of how successful these microtransactions are. After all, as we've seen with quite a few publishers, once they get the rights to the IP, they don't necessarily need the developer anymore. Not if they don't care about making the games good, they only care about making the games monetizable. You're not keeping lights on in studios if you're spending massive amounts of money on microtransactions. You're lining the pockets of men like Strauss Zelnick, men who are already super rich but then complain that the most profitable piece of entertainment of all time is under-monetizing people. And when you're dealing with men who have brains like that, when woodchoppers like Zelnick make up the leadership of the AAA game industry, you can't expect it to have much artistic integrity left, and it fucking doesn't. The so-called AAA industry is in a creative fucking rut, and in a total fucking shambles as companies scrabble and scrape to keep their unsustainable growth growing. And I'm not saying overthrowing capitalism will solve these problems, but I am suggesting that if we took it, capitalism, and put it in a little box and fed it birdseed and other little bits of matter that we found, if we had means of keeping the beast under control, we might be in a better position, or at least in a position where the excess, where the decadence, and it is decadence, of the game industry's executives doesn't dictate the course of the AAA game industry. And I feel like if there were some reins on this, where it wasn't allowed, where corporate excess wasn't allowed to get so completely out of control, things wouldn't look like the fall of fucking Rome right about now. Anyway, this is a grim reminder that microtransactions aren't going anywhere anytime soon, not just because they make companies lots of money, but industry executives directly, personally stand to benefit from their inclusion. And me, I'm not fine with that. I'm not fine with that. They make more than enough money already, they don't need these fucking bonuses. But I never wanted to hear it. I've already said several times why I don't want to hear this, but I never again want to hear the bullshit excuse that video games are so expensive to make and never raise their prices. Because that's clearly not what it's about. Not when executives are lining their pockets to this degree. It's just so obviously not what it's about. It's about people with tons of money wanting to make as much money out of this business as possible before it fucking collapses. Not people who give a shit about games on any level. People who give a shit about money, plain and simple.